Hi, Susan.
Hi, Scott.
I'm so happy that you're here to do this video with us today. This is, believe it or not, our 16th one of these that we have done since Stan asked us to do them about a year and a half ago. And we've talked about everything in them from COVID to supply chain to inflation, how that impacts our projects and the things we do to help mitigate all of those different situations and risks with our clients. And as we were talking the other day, in your role in high performance and sustainability, there are so many pieces of that I think mesh so well with what we've talked about. Some of the new things that are out there in the world of carbon credits and energy credits and cryptocurrency, and a lot of it was actually kind of over my head with the stuff other than what we see in the news. So can you give us, at least to start, a little bit of overview of where some of that is in your world today?
Right, so who would have thought the blockchain had anything to do with sustainability, but it's happening. COVID really put a magnifying glass on the performance of buildings, especially in the interiors and our air quality. So a lot of people are now associating the health of the building's interiors with human health, which really bodes well for high performance and sustainability, because that's a drum that we've been beating for a really long time, that it is about wellness and it is about the people who occupy our spaces, because we spend 90% of our time indoors. And with that, because there is that central focus on the person, a lot of companies have recently developed ESG commitments. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And it really looks at what is a company's environmental impact, their social impact, which is their people, and then the policies and standards or governance that rule the operations of the business. And with the environmental piece, a lot of attention has been on a company's carbon footprint, or what kind of energy are they utilizing to power their buildings. And that's where high performance is really seeing an uptick. So when a company is looking at their environmental impact, we look at, just like you said, their energy demand, but then their overall carbon footprint. So there's two ways that a company can become more green or meet their ESG commitments. The first one is renewable energy certificates, and the second one is called carbon offsets. So they're two separate things. So renewable energy certificates represents you buying green power off of the grid.
That's something that we used to see, like in the original LEED scorecards, you could buy green power, for example, to get a point or two.
And when you buy a renewable energy certificate, you're still getting your energy from the grid, but let's just say it's a ground mount solar array that's producing green power somewhere. All of that power gets mixed in together on one grid. So how do you know that you've actually made that commitment or investment in renewable energy? You would go to a broker and you could buy renewable energy certificates, and that certificate actually represents you investing in green power. So we call them RECs. One REC equals 1 megawatt hour of power. A carbon offset is a little bit different. It really looks at CO2 or CO2 equivalent greenhouse gases of a company's footprint. So one offset equals 1 metric ton of CO2. So depending on how big that footprint is, that would tell you how many offsets you would need to buy to clear that out. Now, when we look at how do we know where each fit in the pieces, when we talk about carbon emissions, there's 3 different scopes. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Renewable energy credits only cover scope 2. Carbon offsets cover the rest. They're just different because they are representing different emission scopes.
So as you talked about needing to purchase those through a broker, is that where the cryptocurrency connection fits in?
So when we look at cryptocurrency in the blockchain, that is giving us a platform for verification and ownership. So you could go to a certain cryptocurrency platform and buy offsets, for example, on their blockchain in their token. Or you could go to a third-party broker and buy them on the voluntary market as well. So what happened with how crypto got involved, and it's more on the carbon offset side than the renewable energy certificate side, but they said, okay, well, we have so many offsets and it's really hard to identify what offsets or programs that you're investing in, to say, hey, I bought this offset from this particular program in this particular state, and it represents this investment. The most well-known cryptocurrency that's in the carbon offset arena is called Klima. You can think of them as like an activist for carbon offsets in the crypto world. So what they did was they went out to the market and they said, you know what, we want to help companies go greener, and we want to really rise the demand for purchasing of carbon offsets. But in order to do this responsibly, we have to take all of the bad offsets from the market. So what that means is when you buy a carbon offset, you're really buying into a project that's reducing emissions being emitted into the atmosphere, essentially. Only 5% of all of the offsets that are in the market today are actually projects that are actively sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. The other 95% are projects that are reducing how much carbon they could actually emit. So there's like a hypothetical carbon emissions there, but people buy those hypothetical emissions to offset their own footprint. So what Klima did was they went out and they bought all of the bad offsets, or what they defined as the bad offsets, from the market. They bought over 14 million offsets from the market. And once you buy them, they don't come back. They're locked away, that's it. So what that left was all of the good offsets that they actually could verify, they could point to, they had the third-party verification, and then when they put it on the blockchain, that verifies that purchase and it individualizes it for whoever bought it. So when Klima did this, it did exactly what they wanted it to do, which is help companies go greener and raise the demand for carbon offsets. So they essentially reduced the supply and they increased the demand, and in turn, the price went up for these carbon offsets.
So if I understand both what you just said now and what we've talked about before, one, that supply and demand equation made the cost of those credits go up maybe 4 or 5 times what they were prior to that. But the benefit to that then is when you do buy something, it is verified so that you know that nobody else has purchased that same thing.
Correct. And then in turn, a company is fulfilling their ESG commitment.
Fascinating. Could you explain a little bit? I think maybe everybody has heard of Bitcoin, like the mother of cryptocurrency, but I know there are all of these other ones, and you mentioned Klima is the one that has purchased these credits. And whether I am a company that's doing something in my sustainability program, or if I'm an investor that just wants to make a sound investment, how does that all work together in that market?
Sure. Yes, as you said, Bitcoin's the mother, and then you have a ton of tokens kind of following Bitcoin's ups and downs in a very exaggerated fashion. So Klima is the most well known, so that's why we've been focusing on that. So what I think is exciting about cryptocurrency entering into the offset world is that it's actually making offsets commodities. So before, I could call a broker and I could say, I need 500 offsets to basically neutralize my carbon footprint. And they would give me a quote and I would buy them, and I have a nice little plaque that I can put on the entry table to say I'm essentially like carbon neutral, and that's it. With Klima, when you buy an offset, you're buying a token, so you're buying a representation that's on the blockchain. That price goes up and it goes down. So you actually have the opportunity, you own that offset, you bought it at a certain price, but you have the opportunity to actually have a return on that investment. So that offset price can go up or it could go down. Now, crypto is risky, super risky. And so when you have, Klima is the most well known, but there are other tokens that are doing the same thing or like following the same economic model. And you just have to be careful, because as more of these players come online, we're seeing what we're calling zombie projects. So offsets that you're buying from projects that, they're all of a sudden producing offsets again, they're not actually doing anything, they're just existing, and that's not technically the intent behind buying carbon offsets.
So Susan, you had mentioned different scopes that these things fall into, and that the carbon offsets and the renewable energy credits were in different scopes. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means?
So when we look at carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, they are categorized into 3 different scopes. And this is a standard across all industries. So when I say, oh, this is a scope 1 emission, that's what that means is it's a direct emission. So it's like you putting gas in your car and you're driving it. The fumes from that gasoline being combusted is a direct emissions that you as a person are producing via the car. That is a scope 1 emission. A scope 2 emission is considered an indirect emission, but you're still directly using the power or the energy that is creating the greenhouse gas. So that, for example, that would be the electric and the gas use that you're using to power your house. That is a scope 2 emission. A scope 3 emission is basically everything but scope 1 and 2. It's very broad, and it looks at your value chain. So anything that you buy from the grocery or store, like your Amazon delivery, for example, that is a scope 3 emission. That's actually, out of the 3, that's going to be your largest bucket. And when companies buy carbon offsets, they're mainly offsetting that scope 3 emission. Now, what's interesting for construction is that when we build a building for a client, all the material that we're buying for that building, any of the equipment that we're running in the act of construction is considered a scope 3 emission for our clients. And we're seeing an uptick that clients are asking us to calculate what that carbon footprint is during construction so that they can report it in their ESG program and they can buy the appropriate offsets to offset that footprint during construction.
I'd like to bring this back a little bit now from all of the stuff that you've told us about and focus a little bit on how that impacts our projects, what kind of things we can do to advise our clients in this area, what it means for the cost of sustainability as it relates to our projects and things like that.
When we look at where prices have been with renewable energy credits and offsets and where they're going, it's becoming a hot market. Our friends at Carbon Solutions Group shared with us some pricing that they've seen over the last 12 months, and it's actually reflected what we've seen on our own projects that we've been building for our clients. And so 12 months ago, we look at, let's just say the price of offsets were $5. Today, they're $10. So they've doubled in price. What happened? Cryptocurrency happened. Klima bought all of those bad offsets off the market, and it doubled the price of the available offsets that are left. A move like that is really hard to predict, especially with the blockchain coming into play. RECs, or renewable energy certificates, more solar, more wind, more water are coming online, but it is tied somewhat to fuel prices. So it's a little bit better of a forecast. It's a stair-stepping pathway. So we saw a really big jump, and now it's starting to level off. But McKinsey did some research around pricing. We are going to see about a 15-fold by 2030, 100-fold by 2050, and we're looking upwards to a $50 billion market in these offsets by 2030 alone. So it's getting more popular, the demand is up, more programs are going to have to come online that people can actually buy offsets, but they have to be good programs, and we're just going to see that price rise. As far as construction goes, how that affects us is if our clients are going for, let's say, LEED certification and they want to go for that credit. We recently had a project that, 12 months ago it was one price, because you have to do all of your budgets before the shovel gets in the ground. So we were going through the LEED checklist like we always do, and we itemize everything so our clients know exactly where their investment is per credit. And going through that, we called Carbon Solutions Group, we got an estimate. but we weren't going to buy them for 12 months. In that 12 months, CLIMA happened, and we went from a $30,000 quote to a $170,000 quote, just because the market shifted that much in 12 months. So thankfully, we were able to pivot and find different ways to achieve the points that the green power credit was getting us in other ways, so we didn't actually have to spend any money. So it's really important to have the right team in place that understands the complexity of the offset in the renewable energy certificate market. We can have those conversations and be able to pan out a plan for our clients going forward.
So with everything that we've talked about, like I said at the beginning, from COVID to supply chain to inflation and escalation, and now this is just another new thing that we have taken upon to build and develop the expertise that you and your team have to help our clients navigate through this. And I'm sure it's going to be an invaluable thing as we move forward, especially with what you talked about, the future that's ahead of us.
Yes, you are going to need that team that kind of knows all of the ins and outs and the trends happening, especially as more clients bring online their ESG commitments.
Wow, I can't thank you enough for going through all of that with us this morning, and I'm sure this is going to be one of the most popular things because people are going to hear about it. It blows me away of everything that you know and how you can bring all that to bear to help our projects.
Thank you for having me.
My
Happy
pleasure.
to do it.